What is the weirdest Tinder date that you've been on? Agree to meet at her place, just your average Netflix and chill date. I was in my mid-20s and she was early 30s with one kid. Just gorgeous blue-eyed blonde. She lets me in the front door and there's about a 40-year-old man just sitting in a recliner and her son was just sitting on the couch and they were watching TV. She grabs my hands and takes me down to the basement. Obviously just anxiety to the duck in nines, like what is going on? That is her husband and she can just duck who she wants apparently. So we go at it while her hubs and son watch TV. She was being obnoxiously loud. Grade 6 but super awkward, especially leaving. Made eye contact with the dude on the way out. He looked just dead in the eyes, like a defeated look. Never went back. About 10 minutes and she karate chopped a child and then spent the rest of the date holding her blouse closed because one of the buttons had come off. 2 years later we're about to buy a house together. The weirdest one was going out with this dentist guy. We were in a cafe. He then asked to see my teeth and questioned about my oral hygiene. I have pretty good teeth according to him, but that was weird. I noticed a cute French girl. In her bio she mentioned there were some tadpoles in a pothole by her house that she wanted to rescue. I never know what to start off with, so I figured this would be a good conversation starter. I ended up bringing a ladle, spoon with holes in it, and we fished a few out of the pothole, put them in a jar and brought them to a nearby pond. The rest of this first and last date was super awkward, but hey, at least we rescued some tadpoles. Guy offered me a bag of marijuana at the beginning of the date, then spent the rest of the evening talking about molecules and energies and how the government is trying to give us cancer because of something in the lights we use. Some weird pseudoscientific stuff. I just nodded along and ate my food. He didn't eat anything because he fasts 23 hours a day. The best part was that the woman at the table next to ours could hear our conversation and we exchanged knowing looks. Where her eyes said WTF is up with this guy, and mine said I know. Guy kept asking me out for weeks and even called me. We had exchanged numbers eventually, to convince me, so I decided to give it a try. We decided to meet at a bar. He got there 30 minutes late and ordered a Coke. Apparently, he was a recovering alcoholic. That's not a problem for me. I just thought it was weird that he had agreed to go to a bar, and then he proceeded to perform on me what felt like a job interview. At some point I even sarcastically asked, "Am I doing okay here?" After 40 minutes of that, he got up, paid for his Coke and said, "I'm gonna go. I have to get up early tomorrow," and left. We haven't talked since. Plenty of fish, but oh well. Telling anyways. She just got out of the hospital and a snap blizzard hit. The 14th of February, 2014. The bus dropped her off but no taxi or Uber dared drive out to get her, so she was stranded at the Waffle House. So I took me and my Jeep Grand Cherokee the 100 miles in the snow to meet for the first time, and to save her, I made it 90% of the way, hit some black ice, then slid sideways into a power pole. The guy that lived there pulled out his tractor trailer and pulled me off the pole. I continued my journey as the night is shiny. Smashed armor. I make it to the Waffle House and pick her up. Her door doesn't open because it was smashed in. She climbs over from the other side, casually brushing aside bits of broken glass from the shattered window. We proceed to drive 25 minutes in the snow while freezing air, tossing her post-surgery bedhead hair around. We made casual conversation. We get to her house and I get out so she can climb back over my seat to get out. She thanks me and we part ways. Come to find out my truck's frame was bent and should not have been driven. 4 years later, we're happily married. Going through IVF to have a daughter. TL. Doctor wrecked my car to save her in a snowstorm. She acted like it was normal and not cold sitting next to a broken window. I married her. I picked up this one girl from her house and she fell asleep until we got to the restaurant. While talking before the date, he explained that he doesn't drink or smoke or do any hard drugs. While on the date he tells me he is going to drop acid tomorrow. When I brought up what he previously said, he argued with me about how sugar is more of a drug than acid. Sure buddy. We were at a soccer game and he became aggressive and started making weird grunting noises. The worst part? I overheard the people behind us say, "Oh look, these two are on a first date. It's not going well. Do you see how uncomfortable she looks?" Hilarious now but painfully awkward at the time. Went to a local cafe. Date went well until she flipped the crazy switch. She started inquiring when we would get an apartment together, as well as have children. Also, how many children we would have. She ended up messaging every day, multiple times a day, wondering why I didn't want to talk to her. I ended up calling her and just telling her it wasn't going to work. She flipped and told me our relationship was built in lies and she was breaking up with me. We went on one date. Met a guy on Tinder. We talked for a while on FB before meeting. He decides to come to my work for my lunch break. I was working third shift at the time, so this was at like 3 AM. I hung out in his car in complete silence while he played on his phone. Then he started to show me pictures of real dead bodies on his phone. I hopped out of his car so fast. That was my first and last Tinder date. We had met briefly before, and she stopped by my house before we went out to eat, as she apparently lived close by. We spoke for like 90 seconds, then she asked to use my bathroom. She must have been in there for an hour. I knocked to see if she was okay and she didn't answer. After a while I knocked again, a little worried that she'd fainted in my bathroom or something. After like 5 or 10 minutes of knocking on the door, and her not replying, I was getting worried. I had sudden fear that she was deaf or something and hadn't told me, and couldn't hear me. So I tried to call her phone, and I would hear it ring once inside and vibrate, then get muted. I was very confused and worried, but I could still sort of hear her moving around on the other side of the door. I was at that point even saying stuff like look, if something embarrassing has happened in there, just don't worry about it. Just let me know you're okay, and I'll pass you and whatever you need, just no reply. I started opening the door from the outside with a screwdriver, panicking, and just as I got the door open, she just quietly said occupied, like you might say in a public bathroom. I opened the door and she was standing in front of the mirror, doing something with her makeup, but didn't seem to be actually wearing any makeup, having been in the bathroom for like an hour. I was like, what the hell? And she was just like, are we late for dinner? Edit. Whoa. This one sure got lots of replies. There's no exciting ending to the story. She wouldn't explain why she was acting so weird, and we'd literally just met. So I noped out of that whole situation and kicked her out. Some time later, I happened to be talking to a friend, who is a cop, about it, and his instinct was that it might have been some sort of setup for a robbery. That is, she left the doors jammed open for others to follow her in, or at least she was scoping the place out, and something went wrong. For example, her accomplices never showed, or she chickened out. Guy attempted to put his hand up my skirt as a way of confirming that that was how I had been assaulted on a train a few years prior. Edit to add context below, because somehow a number of people are seeing this as my own fault, partially because it would have been a turn off for the date in question. Him. Do you drive into work? Me. Yep. How about you? Him. Public transport. How come you don't take the train? Me. I'm not a fan of public transport, and besides, I have free parking at work, so it's win-win for me. Him. How come you don't like public transport? Me. A few years ago some douchebag stuck his hand up my skirt when I was getting off the train. So anyway, him. Did he do it like this? He then proceeded to put his hand up my skirt while we were sitting down on a park bench, and got high enough to touch the gusset of my stockings. About 15 minutes and we were discussing travel, and we'd both been to Amsterdam, and then he said this is probably more of a second date conversation, but when I was in Amsterdam 2 hookers blew me while my girlfriend waited in the room. I guess it was raining outside, so his GF waited in the room. The chick went on for an hour about sloths. Worst date I went on hands down. A guy acted incredibly interested in me and I gave him a shot. Told me he didn't have any money for a date. Fine. We are in college. I get it. Proceeds to show up. I pay for him the whole time. Everything is going great. Asks to see me again. Next day, doesn't even talk to me. Hope the free food was worth it. For the record, I am female. I matched with a guy I went to high school with and who I always thought was really good looking and really cool. Played sports. Well liked by everyone. etc. I probably hadn't seen him in 2 years at this point, but in his Tinder pictures he still looked the same. so we agreed to meet up for coffee. He comes in with greasy long hair, a beard, and actually looked homeless, and went on to tell me that he dropped out of college and has severe ADHD now. He couldn't focus on one thing and was fidgeting the entire date. Told me how he's now one with the earth, and at the end of it told me he was gay. I'm a girl. I seriously thought I was being punked. We went to a pond and looked for frogs and stuff. We saw beaver. It was great. Not traditional, but perfect for me. She was using pics about a year ago. She had awesome text game. Found out she had a form of autism. She was much bigger. She was smoking cigs and was dying of cancer. I tried to be nice for the rest of the night. Turns out she was just broke and really wanted a free meal. I found out almost instantly when she devoured almost every roll at Red Lobster in like 2 minutes. I called her back. My first ever Tinder date was with a guy from Romania. He was kinda cute and I thought it was cool that he was from another country. We'd been texting for a week or so and he seemed interesting. We met at a festival and the first thing that I noticed was that he was about 8 inches shorter than I'd expected and didn't look much like he did in photos. Not a huge deal. A lot of people look different in photos. He also had way too much gross smelling cologne. After hurrying through the festival we sat and chatted for a while and I told him about how I love children and animals. He proceeded to tell me that when he lived in Romania, he used to like to pick cats up by their tails and throw them on top of houses, and that it didn't really hurt them. He also said that he thought Americans needed to beat their kids more. After the conversation died down awkwardly, I made some excuse about needing to go home. To my surprise, he still wanted a second date. The next guy I met on Tinder ended up being the absolute best date I've ever been on and we've been together for almost 3 years now. When I was a freshman in college I went on a coffee date with a guy who had lied about his age. He was 10 years older than I thought he was. Turned out he was an English teacher for high school seniors. I was essentially the same age as his students. Gross. I was the weirdest Tinder date someone had been on. He was intelligent, handsome and very interesting to talk to. Capital I, however, was so gorum nervous about meeting him. Whenever he asked me a question about myself I would move my hands about like I was doing the Vogue dance move. We were drinking tea at my favorite tea shop, which was right beside the hospital he worked at and I could not quell my hands. I'm sure I looked like an Italian man on speed because my anxiety was at an all-time high and this guy was insanely out of my league and everything combined made for a really uncomfortable date. The real reason I've been single for 3 years. I'm better now, but still can't talk to attractive people without completely tripping over my words. I've stopped gesticulating as much since I accidentally hit another date in the face. But that is another awful story. This was a few dates in. The parents invited us over for dinner and to watch a movie, so I bring her on over to meet the folks. Among many things my mom had made deviled eggs. Right around 2 dozen of them. Now unknown to me, this girl's kryptonite was deviled eggs. In the span of 40 minutes she had consumed about 20 of them. She was decently fit, but could eat like a mofo. About halfway through the movie, she starts sitting rather awkwardly, looking like something was up. Shortly after she excuses herself to the bathroom, where she remains for about 20 minutes, comes out, says she's not feeling well and needs to head out. So I see her out the door to her car. Upon returning inside I walked by the bathroom. She had inhabited. Mother of God. The smell coming out of that dead zone could only be rivaled by a World War I battlefield in the heat of summer. It's a miracle there was any paint on the walls after the cloud of acid her rectum had released. After 2 bottles of Lysol and an hour with the fan on I went in for a damage assessment. Not only did she kill 2 full rolls of toilet paper, she went after an entire box of baby wipes. May God have mercy on her asshole. Because it got some mileage that time. Banged this chick on the beach at 4 AM and then had to walk through CVS with my clothes drenched in seawater and my jeans half rolled up to ask the old lady working there where the plan B is. It was awkward. She had also previously tried to get me to duck her in a public pool filled with children and I had to explain to her that in the US you get killed in jail for it like that. She was from Peru. I was newly single just after Tinder took off. The relationship I was in was boring, dull and defeating, so I was looking to do some stupid for a while. That led me to matching with interesting folk, but I wanted to have some experiences. One woman, a little older than me, Wiccan, hippie, crazy, perfect. We hooked up the day we matched. She was doing things I'd only ever read about. A part of me was scared, but like I said, I was itching for some good times. Week or so later she asks if I want to go for a hike. Sure. On the hike asks if I want to drop acid. Sure. Mid-trip she gets naked, tells me to follow suit, then brings me to a clearing in the bush for a ritual. Hard no. In my acid trip mind, this was where she cuts me open and sacrifices my body to Beelzebub or Summit. I bailed half clothed and tripping right out. Retrospect, we were likely about to have some earth-shattering hippie acid sex in the wild. But as I found my way back home I was looking over my shoulder for the main intruder, Detective S3. Never talked to her again. I did see her on Tinder later and I think she found Jesus. Went on a date with this cute girl. We talked about an hour and she felt more fascinated when I brought up my cats. She was very eager to meet them, so we proceeded to go to my place. Spent few hours just playing with my cats. She was about to leave and before she put her shoes on to go, she says to me, "Oh, I forgot something," and went to grab my youngest kitten, during the time 4 months old, and picked him up and wanted to walk out with him. I stopped her and told her what was she doing. To her reply, "I thought you let me adopted him, like girl for lol." First date after my ex and me broke up. I had spoken to her okay both Tinder and Snapchat for a couple of weeks until the date. I get to the date and she looks nothing like her profile pics or snaps. We have the date and she even asks me about profile pics and says I look more handsome IRL than on the pics. I however can't get myself to lie, but neither do I want to hurt her feelings, so I kinda just answer thank you without repaying the compliment. After the date I go in to give her a hug and she pulls me in to kiss me. After that I just hurried off. 10 minutes later she sends me a snap selfie and once again I'm dumbfounded because it just doesn't look like her. She had mastered the art of just the most perfect angle to look 10 times hotter in the photos than IRL. I've been on one Tinder date. She didn't look anything like the pics. She was much worse. We went to the mall and for ice cream, and after that she took us to Toys R Us. She was just walking around looking at the toys. I'm not really a rude person so I stuck with it, but it was just terrible. Uninstalled Tinder after that. Right before the date she asked me if I could pick her up. I told her I don't have a car. I'm from Europe and my city has good public transportation, so no need for a car. During the date she kept mentioning how cool it would be if you had a car and even tried telling me about car sharing services and how I should be using them. She also repeatedly asked me what I thought of her during and after the date. We never met again though. I was new to the area so she picked me up to take me to her favorite bar for a couple drinks. In the backseat there were 2 other girls that were her friends. About 5 minutes into the drive one of the girls in the back says we should play truth or dare on the drive to the bar. So we start to play and everyone picked truth the first round, so when it was my turn again I said truth again and my date said that I can pick truth twice in a row and I have to do a dare. So I said okay and that I will do a dare. Then one of her friends in the back said we dare you to walk down the street naked. And I just laughed because I thought it was a joke. But then my date pulled the car over to the side of the road and they were all saying I had to do it or they would just bring me back home. So after a few minutes I finally gave in and got out of the car and got fully naked and started to walk down the street. They then picked up my clothes and drove right next to me until we got to an intersecting. Then they all got out and said I could have my clothes back once they all get a picture for Snapchat. After that we got in the car and went to the bar. After that we dated for 5 months. Not weirdest but most interesting for sure. Went on a date with a pretty good looking chick off of there. Everything went fine, then she had me over. We went to her room and instead of sex, we started talking about what we do and she dropped the bomb that she's a cam general and does porn for some pretty big companies. I specifically remember Naughty America being one of them. We spent the next like hour watching her get plowed and asking her questions about the behind the scenes of porn. She brought a stuffed shark. I'm fine with that. I understand the importance of comfort and therapy stuff. We talked in a cafe for a bit. We talked about past trauma. She talked in a loud voice, very loudly discussing being molested. raped, etc etc. Alright, we all need someone to confide in. We all need someone to support us. But can you keep it down? Finished up at the cafe. Politely, we ended up in the back of her car, her with her stuffed shark, me, still chatting about some super deep stuff. Then she asked me, "Can you abuse me?" I told her we could make out for a bit, but I really didn't feel comfortable. Just super awkward all around. I hope she finds happiness and comfort in the future. I have only been on one Tinder date because it was so awful. Not super weird, just bad. After he, completely unprompted, explained to me how feminism doesn't make sense because feminism doesn't take into account that men work harder than women. He also told me how he is no longer a homophobe because he decided all homophobes are closet cases. He literally stopped actively hating on gay folk because he was worried that would make him look gay. He also started almost every sentence afterwards with "as a former homophobe." I deleted the app. Edit. I date guys sometimes. But I'm not exactly straight. Yeah. It came up. Yeah, it was as awkward as you're imagining. I'm also heavily involved in the queer community. An interesting sounding guy agreed to meet me in the sci-fi section of a Barnes & Noble. Good so far. He was running late. Fine. We meet up and he seems kinda shy and insecure. Fine. He's heard of none of the books I've read, even the classics, and can't tell me anything that he likes other than semi-explicit manga. Not so good. We go to the cafe to talk and he insists I order some super sweet secret menu frappuccino. I pay, starting to feel a bit weird. We started to talk. He brings up, in turn, politics and video games. The rub. He basically quotes John Oliver and Markiplier, respectively. I tell him I've seen those shows, and ask about movies, and says he doesn't really watch them, trying to avoid a walk home in the rain. I ask about family. He shrugs it off. At that point, it was so awkward that I left. Better to endure a stroll in the rain than so much strange unoriginal mediocrity. Met this girl on Tinder and she invited me over for a massage. So I get there and there is just something totally off about her. I don't know what it is. I mean, she looks normal, but something about her was just really unsettling. Anyway, I go to the bathroom and when I get back she is sitting on the couch looking at me with a big glass of wine saying "I poured you some wine." All I can think is nope. I'm not drinking it. I don't wanna wake up missing a kidney. So I noped out of there. Probably just me letting my paranoia ruin a sure thing, but IDK there was just something really weird about her. I think I need to read through these stories before a date. It's given me a lot of confidence just knowing that I'll never come close to ducking up a date this bad. I had been on a few dates with a guy I met on Tinder, and things seemed to be going really well. We had common interests. He was funny, smart, attractive and incredibly kind. One evening he invited me over to his house. We had always had public dates beforehand, and I agreed. The night started out great. He cooked dinner, we watched a movie, and things started to lead towards the bedroom. Before we got there, he asked if he could show me his favorite room in the house. Somewhat confused, I agreed. He opened a door beside his bedroom, and we walked into a baby nursery. Not just any nursery, a nursery with an adult-sized crib, changing table, diapers etc. He told me that he was into baby role playing and would be very happy if I would agree to be his mommy. I'm a very open-minded person, but that's not something I would be able to do for him, and politely excused myself. He messaged me the next day, asking if I would reconsider, and I once again politely told him that we could no longer see each other. Looked cute on her profile, ended up not being true. Turns out she was also mentally not all there. There was obvious signs of retardation. Sorry if that's not PC, and was showing me pictures of her ingrown toenails the doctor pulled out of her while we were dining. By the end of the diner she had moved to sit next to me on my side of the booth. That was it for me. I told her I had to go to work and GTFO. That was the last time I told a girl I'd pay for her on the first date. Posted this here before on a different account, but this story was fun, so here we go. Meet up with this guy at a local bar to get some beers and lunch. Date's going great so far, we're vibing pretty well, joking around, and getting into conversations without the awkward small talk. Halfway through the date we're talking about things we daydream about. I told him about my dreams of being a musician, then asked him about his. His eyes get really dark as he says, "I like to fantasize about the light leaving my enemy's eyes at my hands." At first I'll laugh because I think he's kidding, but he keeps a straight face. I clear my throat and don't know what to say. So all that comes out it. "I doubt how do you do it?" Without even a moment's hesitation he answers, "Harpoon." Yeah. There wasn't a second date after that, haha. Not that weird, more just awkward. I went on a date with a guy who had put that he was polyamorous in his bio, and I'm poly too. It's hard to find guys who are okay with that, at least in my experience. So I was excited. We met up a bar and it quickly became obvious that polyamory was his long-term girlfriend's idea and he was reluctantly giving it a try to please her. It kind of made me sad. He seemed so devoted to her, and I kind of felt like the date was an obligation for him. But he was sweet and friendly. We never saw each other again after that, but I hope he figured things out. Girl was morbidly obese, not apparent from the pics, but I didn't know. Pierced, tattooed and heavily into J-rock, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, just painting a picture. She was also a heavy and loud breather, like non-stop. Was very aggressive and ranting on Twitter, but was very shy and reserved in real life except for the very big push-up bra. She didn't really had anything to say and she didn't contribute to conversations. She mostly okay at everything or just responded with 3-word sentences. I paid $90 for the food at the Japanese restaurant and later went home with her to watch a Netflix movie. She had condoms hidden in her bed blanket and probably expected to have 6, but after the movie I decided to go home. Also, she turned out to have schizophrenia and hopelessly unemployed with no real perspective. Overall it wasn't a too negative experience, but not worth it to spend the time and like $90 and the time for someone I never heard of again. I was just very nice to her, but maybe I should have cancelled it way earlier. Only Tinder date I went to. From what I heard, a girl's experience on Tinder is that there are only weirdos while guys just meet girls being misleading with their pics. Not sure about the myth of crazy girls.